Ahmed is a quiet, self-contained boy. He keeps to himself and does what he's told. He greets his mother, Fayuzia, as he departs for his first day of university. A young girl walks by him at school, speaking Arabic on the phone, and Ahmed perks up, visibly interested in her. He's so taken by her beauty, he finds he must force himself to look away. The students enter class and Ahmed finds a seat, but he's forced to get up when the girl from this morning squeezes past him to sit next to her friend. As their bodies brush past each other, Ahmed can't help but feel a magnetic attraction. Their teacher for the comparative literature course introduces herself as Anne Morel. She warns the students that this year's curriculum will be rich, dense, but rightfully challenging. They'll be studying Arabic poetry on the subject of desire. She introduces them to a major work from the 12th century called Majnun Layla, explaining how it influenced Western literature. She hands out reading lists to the class, equipped with addresses to where they can find the recommended texts. Professor Morel explains there's over 100 words in Arabic to describe multiple states of love. The emotion of love is at the heart of two main poetic movements, one where love remains platonic to the point of merging with the divine, and the other that is dedicated to life's pleasures of the flesh. Ahmed's classmate spots him on the train, coming over to talk to him. He acts indifferent, pretending as though he wasn't aware they were in the same class. She tries to break the ice, asking if he's going to get the books while admitting she always gets lost around here. She's from Tunisia. Ahmed ignorantly remarks that her French is very good, but everyone in Tunisia's French is good. It's their unofficial language. The conversation sputters to an awkward pause, and the couple are pushed together as the train stops to let on more passengers. She inquires if Ahmed can speak Arabic. He can speak a little Algerian Arabic. She's heard Algeria is beautiful, but Ahmed's never been. The girl introduces herself as Farah. Farah reads a poem from one of the books at the store, and Ahmed finishes the lines. Farah's surprised he knows it by heart, but it's a very famous quote, according to him. Farah stumbles upon a book called The Perfumed Garden, asking Ahmed if he's ever read it, but he's never heard of it either. It's a manual of Arabian erotology and was written in 15th century Tunisia by Sheikh Nafsi. Curious, Farah opens the book, finding a chapter called The Sundry Names to the Sexual Parts of Man. That's just as it sounds, offering different Arabic words that refer to the male sexual organ that evoke various images and moods. Farah gets a kick out of reading all the different names, and so does Ahmed seemingly, but when Farah says she's going to purchase it, Ahmed reacts as if it's filth that couldn't possibly be called literature. Farah doesn't understand how he can say that without having read it, but Ahmed remains unnaturally defensive about the subject. At home, Ahmed pleasures himself to be in the darkness of his room. He finds his father, Hakim, where he is every day, on the couch, and greets his sister Dalila in the kitchen. Ahmed notices how Dalila's smiling at her phone and figures it's Bilal. She immediately lies, claiming she's texting Emma about homework, and Ahmed snatches the phone out her hands. He scrolls through, reading Dalila and Bilal's exchanged I love yous out loud as she furiously fights to retrieve the device. The children immediately settle down as their mom Fayuzia enters, her stern presence demanding attention. Dalila runs off to school in a huff. Ahmed works with his Arabic friends, Karim and Sedu. His conversations with them seem more relaxed. Sedu teases Karim about Salima, the girl he's currently dating, hinting that he hopes talking isn't all they're doing, proclaiming shagging is the foundation for a great relationship. Ahmed gives Sedu a look, but doesn't add anything to the conversation. The class reads a passage out loud. It's Farah's turn to read, and while she dictates her lines of the erotic poem, Ahmed's eyes wander over her, noting the small tattoo on her arm, the way her shirt bunches around her stomach, and how short her pants are, cutting into her upper thigh. He's so lost, he forgets it's his turn to read next. He can't bring himself to say the salacious words out loud and passes on his turn, making the excuse that he's lost his voice. Ahmed fidgets anxiously while he discusses alternative courses at the academic advisor's office. He can't stand the sexual content of Professor Morel's syllabus, it makes him antsy. He contemplates his other options, medieval literature, comparative literature, and Greek tragedy. He agrees Greek tragedy sounds good, and not erotic at all, thank Allah, though the advisor's surprised he wants to change from Professor Morel's course. Apparently, Morel is highly requested each year. Just as she's about to sign him up for the Greek tragedy lecture, Ahmed realizes that if he does transfer courses, he won't get to see Farah anymore. Professor Morel's class is the only course they have together, and he doesn't want that to end, doesn't want to stop seeing her, so he changes his mind at the last minute. Ahmed notices Farah's card has declined at lunch, and opts to sponsor her meal. She thanks him, assuring him she'll pay him back. She's not sure what happened with her card. Her father should have deposited the money. Farah reveals she's not on scholarship. Her parents send the money to her, and it's a huge sacrifice on their part. Ahmed jokes it's usually the immigrant who sends money back home to the village, sarcastically calling her a rich kid. She rolls her eyes, stating that if she's a rich kid, he's what they would call a zamigri, an Arabic term for Tunisian workers that migrate to France, who are conventional and not well liked. Ahmed's surprised to be called conventional, but he definitely thinks she's the zamigri villager out of the two of them, seeing as she's the recent migrant. Farah admits she doesn't know all the social codes, and maybe hangs out with the local Tunisians too much. She's not living the Parisian bohemian life she'd planned in her head. Farah asks Ahmed to show her around Paris, seeing as it's his city, and Ahmed confidently agrees. When Ahmed gets home, he Googles things to do in Paris, trying to plan a date that will blow Farah's mind. His talk earlier at lunch was a bluff, so he can't afford to not put his money where his mouth is now. Hakim bothers him about not closing down his Facebook while he uses the computer, and it dawns on Ahmed that his father knows Paris pretty well. Hakim admits he does know all the museums, art galleries, and restaurants, but he's done all that already. Ahmed decides to stick to Google, checking all the locations manually. Ahmed takes Farah on his guided tour of Paris, and so far, so good. She's falling in love with the city of romance. He takes her to a local Arabic restaurant, and they discuss the depth of their involvement in Muslim culture. Ahmed confides his family does Ramadan and the whole nine. He must have only drank a couple times, as they're very strict. Farah wonders if he'd judge her if she drinks, and assures her he won't. She believes if you like reading, you've got to drink. Wine is life and books are life, so it seems only logical. She recommends the Arabic authors Abu Nawas and Omar al-Khayyam to him, explaining he'd love the way they describe wine. On the train home, Ahmed smiles at his cell phone as he replies to a text from Farah thanking him for the trip. She loves Paris even more because of him. The warm, giddy feeling flooding through him is interrupted when a familiar voice calls his name, his ex, Malika. She joins him, noting it's been a long time since they've seen each other. The tension is palpable as he starts to explain he wasn't sure whether to contact her or not, and she doesn't even let him finish, already sure of where he's going. She admits it's a shame, though, as they used to be friends. Ahmed tries to change the topic, and inquires how she's going. Malika admits things are good for her, she's recently engaged. Ahmed simply nods at that, unsure of whether he should feel hurt or not. But at least that means Malika should be happy, right? Karim asks Ahmed how university's going and he admits it's great, except for the fact it's mostly girls. Sedu's excited at that idea, and Ahmed teases him, describing the cornucopia of female flavors at his school. Karim mentions someone spotted Ahmed and Malika at the station. Karim believes Malika would have made the perfect wife for Ahmed. She's subtle and halal, but Ahmed reveals she's found someone else. Pulling Ahmed to the side, Karim subtly informs him Arabs on the estate are spreading rumors about Dalila dating Bilal, speculating what she has and hasn't done with him physically. In the Muslim community, this could bring shame to the men and her family. Karim warns their reputations are at stake, and that Ahmed is even being called the Parisian on the estate. Ahmed perks up as Farah runs upstairs to greet him, but wilts a little when her friend Lee appears behind her, having lost the race. Farah brought her along, since she doesn't know Paris very well either. While walking, Lee pops a bottle of wine, to much cheer from Farah. Ahmed asks if they can toast with Saha, a common Arabic toast to health, and Farah says they could, but she much prefers using cheers, sant, or nostrovia in Russian. The preference of languages other than her native tongue seems to bother Ahmed. As they make their way through Paris after seeing The Three Musketeers, Lee and Farah rave about the show, imitating the mannerisms of the characters. Ahmed's lost in his own wonder as he admires the city. They bump into a man on the street and Lee greets him with a flourish, like one of the musketeers, and the man reciprocates the gesture, kissing her hand dramatically. Hearing the girls giggling and chatting, Ahmed turns around, immediately flying into a rage upon witnessing the scene. He suddenly behaves possessively about the women, telling the man the girls are with him and to have some respect before ordering him to piss off. The girls are confused by his sudden and unwarranted aggression. He even accuses them of encouraging the man's advances. Farah believes Ahmed is judging her prematurely because of their cultural differences, and forces him to stop in his tracks as he seethes. Lee curses as she realizes she's accidentally sent a text to Maxence that was meant for Julian, and Farah laughs at her blunder. Ahmed notes Lee isn't very straightforward, and she admits the boys aren't serious relationships, just lovable shags. Farah offers that Lee should go with whoever's best in bed. Lee offers a story about how she was at Julian's the other night, and it was so boring, she'd fallen asleep in missionary position. Farah cracks up laughing at the story, but Ahmed walks anxiously behind them, wondering how they can speak so flippantly about something so intimate. He fears that maybe women would talk about him in such a degrading way one day. Lee and Ahmed share the bottle while waiting for Farah to return from peeing. She appears from behind the bushes, but in her attempt to jump the fence, her skirt gets snagged on the bars and she calls Ahmed for help. She's swaying a bit, so Ahmed grabs hold of her waist to help her down. As she lands, Farah complains her leg hurts, and lifting up her skirt, she flashes Ahmed her thighs, where a small cut in the fabric exposes her tender skin. Ahmed gently presses on it, checking if it hurts, his intentions completely innocent at first. But he can't help but be distracted as his fingertips pass over the bare thigh flesh and seem to move of their own accord, interlocking with Farah's. He looks up, their eyes meeting, and he feels warmth between them. The moment is broken when they hear Lee throwing up in the background. They quickly realize she's not well, and she opts to head home, leaving the two lovebirds alone. Finally alone together and unsure of what to do, the couple walk for a while. The two head to Farah's small apartment. Ahmed nervously pokes his head in, but has to gather himself in the bathroom before he can manage to enter. He finds her outside, admiring the view from her little hideaway. He admits he loves the spot as she welcomes him under the warmth of the blanket. Ahmed pulls out a joint as Farah points out her fascinating neighbors across the way. She notes that the man across the street is an insomniac and so, too, apparently is the lady across from him. She noticed they were both watching the same show. Ahmed realizes that they seem to only be separated by a wall, and Farah admits it took her 2 months to realize they were in the same flat. Farah sleeps peacefully, but Ahmed's wide awake. He watches her sleep, taking advantage of the moment to reach out, wanting to gently caress her face. His hands shake as they pass over her lips, and she wakes, watching him with a frisky smile. She turns to face him, leaning in to initiate a kiss, but then retreats, waiting for him to meet her halfway. After a second, he does, and soon the kisses tumbleweed into more passionate touches. Their breathing intensifies, and Farah takes off Ahmed's shirt. Sensing the lust building between them, Ahmed pauses, assuring Farah they don't have to go so fast, though she doesn't see what the problem is, claiming they both want to. Ahmed's unnerved by that, immediately getting dressed and leaving. He doesn't even tell Farah goodnight. When he gets into the street, he paces till he feels like he's far away enough to breathe and then stops, sitting on the sidewalk as he contemplates what just happened. Arriving home in the morning, Ahmed gently covers his father with a blanket after sipping his morning coffee. He checks on Dalila, cursing when he finds she's not in her room. Ahmed finds Dalila on her way home from school and accosts her about her scandalous behavior, interrogating her on where she slept last night. Dalila tries to stop him from embarrassing her in public as people start staring at the commotion. But Ahmed doesn't relent, telling her she's bringing shame upon their family. Dalila argues that Ahmed does whatever he wants, but he reminds her it's different for him, as a man, and she knows it. Dalila isn't concerned about Ahmed or those little weasels he hangs out with, shoving him away as she walks off on him. As the teacher returns graded papers in class, giving each student commentary about their work, Ahmed glances over to Farah, his eyes showing his longing for communication with her. Class is dismissed, and Farah walks past Ahmed, returning his longing glance, when Professor Morrell asks to speak with him before leaving. The professor notes he hasn't signed up for his presentation yet. Ahmed makes the excuse he's not comfortable with orals, but the teacher claims it's non-negotiable for her course, letting him know when she'll send along his reading materials. Ahmed exits and finds Farah waiting for him. The two casually chat about what the professor wanted, and after an awkward silence, Farah returns a jacket Ahmed left at her place after speeding out. Another brief silence passes. Farah works up the nerve to tell Ahmed that if this is new for him, they can go slow. Ahmed is insulted by the suggestion she's made, and walks off on her again. Farah stops him before he escapes to the next class. Ahmed, afraid of what the intimacy meant, claims it changes nothing between them, that they're friends. Farah nods, understanding. As Ahmed reads the materials for his class, his thoughts wander to Farah, whom he imagines placing her hand on his heart. He lurks like a sentinel over Dalila, who separates herself from Bilal. Sedu mentions Karim's stag party to Ahmed, suggesting the boys should visit Amsterdam's red light district and get their beaks wet, even offering to sponsor the affair. Ahmed can't believe he'd be willing to pay for his first time, but Sedu claims he doesn't want to end up a virgin. Ahmed dedicates himself with renewed vigor to his studies, and visits an Arabic music show with Farah and Lee. Farah sings along to the lyrics, playfully dancing with Lee. They stop at a cafe for drinks after, and Damien notes the singer's eyes were mesmerizing, like a single glance could melt you into liquid, mentioning she looks like Farah. Instead of a jealous rage, Ahmed amiably agrees the singer had quite the stage presence. A serving of couscous is brought to their table, on the house, as the waitress announces that they serve it free on Fridays. The Tunisians at the table are unfamiliar with how the couscous is served here, and Farah wonders if it's Algerian. Ahmed admits he doesn't know, and Damien questions the authenticity of his Algerian identity. As Lee and Damien tell the story of how they met and found each other again in France, Ahmed notices Farah self-consciously moving her thigh away from him under the table so they don't touch. Lee confesses Damien invited himself tonight because he's fascinated with things from the Orient. Kissing Farah's hand, he clarifies he's fascinated with beautiful things. Farah smokes a cigarette outside while Damien continues aggressively pursuing her. Ahmed sees him kiss her, and Farah notices him watching. Ahmed looks for Farah in the library, finding her in the aisles whispering with Lee. From the conversation, it's clear the two are talking about him, as they both ponder why Ahmed won't touch her. Going through a list of reasons: shyness, premature ejaculation issues, maybe he's small, maybe he's a virgin, or perhaps he's in the closet. The girls fall into silence as he appears, trying to act naturally. Ahmed asks Farah for help with his presentation for morals class. Farah advises Ahmed to memorize his passage and maintain eye contact with the crowd as he speaks. But Ahmed thinks there's no way he could do that. It'd be impossible for him. Farah's fed up with his excuses, wondering what he's scared of. Exasperated, she challenges him to finish something he starts. She admits she went with the first idea that came to mind, and Ahmed claims that's a problem. You can't always go with your first idea, it needs to make sense for the whole text. Farah gets the message, quickly understanding he's not talking about the assignment, but their relationship. Ahmed then asks if Farah's dating Damien. Farah claims they just hung out a few times. Damien's cute but needy, his family did invite her over for Christmas though. Ahmed perks up at that, advising her that if she doesn't like him, she shouldn't go. But Farah admits if she doesn't, she'll be alone on Christmas Eve, which would be quite depressing. Ahmed wants to invite her to his house, but his family doesn't do anything special for Christmas, just a simple dinner. Farah surprisingly accepts. Fayuzia is happy her son's bringing home a Tunisian girl, being from Annaba herself. Ahmed argues she's just a friend, but Fayuzia ignores him. Dalila's reasonably pissed about having to sleep on the couch on Christmas night, finding it unfair that Ahmed gets to bring a girl home when she's not even allowed to date. Ahmed throws up before his presentation, hoping all the nerves have escaped into the toilet so they won't resurface while he's reading. Farah observes him intently, nodding with support as he reads. Professor Morel asks him to speak up, yet again, wanting to at least be able to hear his conclusion. Taking a deep breath, Ahmed concludes that despite all the poetry Majnun has written for Layla, when they're united in the end, he refuses to see her, and speculates the reason is because the object desired is meant to remain a source of poetry. Ahmed theorizes that by remaining fantasy, Majnun's love is poetic and almost divine, concluding the poet-lover himself refuses to live love in the carnal sense, because his poetry is born from the forbidden. Layla is meant to remain the muse, because reality would be disappointing, and to live out their love would be to demean it. As he delivers his outro, posing the question of whether pure love can be consummated or if it even should be, he looks at Farah, his own muse. At Christmas dinner, Hakim discusses the socio-political state of Tunisia, Bourguiba and Arabic inhabited environs, a conversation Farah is more than holding her own in. In fact, the two have a lot in common. As Farah mentions, she's hoping to move back home to become a journalist, which is Hakim's former profession. He was a very good journalist, and because of that, they were forced to leave Algeria because of threats, a reminder that dampens the family's mood. Hakim confesses he'd have rather lost his life there than moved to France to be another unemployed nobody. Fayuzia quickly tries to change the mood of the conversation by asking about Farah's mother, who Farah admits doesn't want her to move back to Tunisia, as she believes the country has no future. Relating to the sentiment, Hakim gushes about Ahmed's passion for writing since he was a boy, hoping he'll become an author and carry on Algeria's great literary traditions. The couple go to Ahmed's room to exchange their Christmas presents. Farah finds his bedroom adorable, and is happy to be let into Ahmed's world even a little. He gifts her two of his favorite books, The Stranger and Banquet Speech, where he's written a note inside about sharing what he likes with her. Farah gives Ahmed a copy of The Perfumed Garden. He chuckles at the reference, and seeing the note he's left in hers, Farah takes it upon herself to one for Ahmed. She writes in Arabic, translating the note as dedicating the book to his sumptuous writing career. He's enthralled by the script and by her, taking the moment to reach out and give her the barest of touches, reassuring her of his feelings. They're interrupted by Dalila calling them down for the family Christmas tradition of watching movies together. Farah sneaks into Ahmed's room, barely touching his back as he sleeps, but she quickly retreats, not attempting anything. The days pass, tension builds between them, and inside Ahmed. He reads The Perfumed Garden, his thoughts wandering to Farah, and finds himself so turned on by the book, he pleasures himself. He writes poetry to express the complex mix of emotions being stirred in him. Sedu surprises Ahmed with the motorcycle he just bought, trying to encourage him to take a ride, but Ahmed has other plans. Sedu looks his friend over curiously, realizing just by the way he's dressed, and his hesitancy to let Sedu come, that he's going somewhere with the girl he brought home for Christmas. After a small argument and faking him out, Ahmed eventually caves, allowing Sedu to accompany him to the New Year's Eve party with the Tunisians. The two sit awkwardly at the event, feeling like they're being avoided by other partygoers, and like they're being judged as hood rats. Sedu doesn't understand what the perceived rift between them is. They are all Arabs, aren't they? Ahmed sips his drink nervously. Sedu's momentarily aghast he's drinking alcohol. Lee arrives, and is ushered in to meet the boys. Farah introduces her and Sedu, grabbing Lee a drink. Lee boldly declares that if she gets drunk tonight, Sedu should be the one to get her some water. While Sedu dances with Lee, Farah prowls over to Ahmed, who's being a wallflower. She brings him onto the floor, seductively dancing with him. The couple inch closer and closer, and at the peak of their intimate moment, the crowd begins chanting the countdown for the new year. As the crowd breaks into cheer, welcoming the new year, Farah kisses Ahmed passionately, but he pulls away, looking around to see if anyone was watching. Utterly rejected, Farah picks up her coat, immediately leaving the party, and Ahmed chases after her. He stops her, wondering what's wrong. She's in utter disbelief that she even has to explain it. She confronts him about whether he thought what he just did was normal behavior. He stonewalls with an excuse, but Farah's fed up. Ahmed's always defensive, always closed off. She feels helping him is impossible. Ahmed still doesn't understand why she's reacting like this, which only hurts Farah even further, but still, her patience doesn't diminish, and she confesses she's in love with him. She rectifies his skewed perception about her promiscuity with the truth: she's only ever dated one person. Ahmed tries to comfort her, but his sudden favor at her newly discovered chastity just revolts her. Farah's officially done with him. Ahmed arrives minutes before his midterms begin, but his core is rocked when he sees Farah, unable to take his eyes off her. He takes his seat, but she's so upset that Farah gets up, changing her own seat. The exam commences, but Ahmed cannot think past the gravity of Farah's actions and what they might mean. Frustrated, Ahmed crumples his exam paper, abandoning the test completely. Ahmed stops going to university, deciding to spend time with the men on the estate instead. When he returns to the group, Sedu wonders why he's not at school, while another mate criticizes him about abandoning his people and becoming parasified, making fun of the way Ahmed dresses. With that small trigger, Ahmed reaches his boiling point and gets into a fight with him that the other men rush to pull apart. Ahmed curses Sedu as he separates him, wondering yet again why he isn't at school. Ahmed claims he's given up on university, but Sedu thinks that's nonsense, wondering if his tantrum is about Farah. Sedu admits that Lee told him how much Farah loves Ahmed, but Ahmed's more concerned about Sedu and Lee dating. He questions how Sedu can date Lee when she's so promiscuous, but he admits that's what he likes about her: she's experienced. Ahmed can't believe Sedu's actions, after all the crap he's given Ahmed about women. Karim's wedding is a joyous occasion for the family, and during the celebration Ahmed loses himself in the drums, dancing in a trance, as if trying to release all the tension he's felt over the past few months. He writes the most sensuous, evocative poem that passionately expresses the overwhelming feelings of lust, love, shame, admiration, and insecurity he feels. He relates the sound of her name to a repeated drum beat, echoed in his heart and mind. Delilah tries, rather unsuccessfully, to get her brother out of bed. When she goes to use the laptop, he springs up, stopping her from taking it. Ahmed checks his emails, waiting on Farah's response to the poem he sent, but nothing's arrived. Ahmed asks Professor Morel for a second chance at the midterm exams, but she can't give him special treatment. His classmates saw him leave. She thinks it's a shame, that his attitude will only comfort those who pray for his downfall. Hakim shows his family footage of a revolution happening in Algiers, while Fayyouzia hands Ahmed a letter addressed to him. Reading it, he knows it's from Farah. It's in Arabic. He goes to Karim, asking if he can translate it. Karim admits he can't speak Arabic, but his new wife Salima can. Ahmed admits he wants to translate a poem, but he's concerned about asking Salima to do it as he's unsure of what the contents of the poem might hold, hinting that it could be erotic. Karim's offended at the idea of an erotic poem written in Arabic, wondering why Ahmed would ever want to translate such a thing. He feels as though it's an assault on the character of Arabic men. Ahmed admits he felt similar to Karim at first, but his study of history reveals that Arabs once wrote of physical pleasures and inebriation. Karim doesn't believe those works are his culture at all. Ahmed wonders if Karim is truly happy with his life now. To Ahmed, Karim sounds like he bought the perfect Arab life kit, where he sits where he's supposed to in the little box he's given and doesn't move around too much. The notion clearly bothers him. Karim feels insulted, immediately demanding Ahmed leave his house, much to his confusion. Ahmed eyes his father's bookcase, noting he's read all the books in there but neglected to teach his children Arabic. Hakim feels it wouldn't have been of any use to them, but Ahmed confronts his father about shutting himself off from everyone around him. Hakim confides that when the family moved to France, the only work available was labor, and he'd chosen not to do that. He hadn't found his place in society, and didn't feel like he should share that with his children. He encourages Ahmed that he can still learn Arabic. It's not too late. When he was a child, Hakim would speak in Arabic to Ahmed, and he understood. Ahmed's heart melts hearing this, relieved to finally communicate with his father. Ahmed feels comfortable enough to ask Hakim to translate the poem for him. His father gives it a quick read, summarizing it as a lover in great suffering. Ahmed admires his father as he works on the exact translation, happy to see him be human again. After reading her translated poem, Ahmed finds Farah, embracing her boldly in the middle of campus, not caring who sees them as he expresses his desire for her. They head back home, unable to contain their mutual desires anymore, and finally seal their love with the physical union they so desperately craved. Farah and Ahmed make innocent yet passionate love, dedicating their virtues to one another.